everyone, and welcome back to KIFF. I hope you're enjoying what we're bringing to you on the KIFF YouTube channel. This is the second of our editions of filmmaking around the globe, and today we're going to head to Canada, a beautiful, welcoming country, which may be a little trickier to film in during the winter. Here to tell us about it is Canadian filmmaker Katia Shannon. Hi everyone, I'm Jo. I'm from KIFF Studios, and today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome a Canadian filmmaker called Katia Shannon to the studio. Hi Katia.
Hi Jo, thank you so much for having me. So nice to meet you as well.
So first of all, I just want to talk about your film Standstill, which you submitted to KIFF for the evening of shorts. And I had the great pleasure of watching, actually, and I really loved it. I thought it's a fantastic film. For those of you who haven't seen it, Standstill is about a girl who has diabetes and gets stuck in a sort of horrific traffic jam on a bridge in somewhere in the middle of Canada. And she suffers from a diabetic attack. And it's a very claustrophobic, atmospheric thriller about what happens to her. So, Katia, do tell us about your inspiration for the film and how it came to be.
So Standstill comes from from very deep within, because I have type 1 diabetes, and it stemmed from the question, how can I as a director learn to externalize feelings that are deeply internal, because that's what really great directors do, and I wanted to set that as a challenge for myself. And it also came as a sort of an artistic need to share with the world what that sensation feels like, because diabetes is a word that's flung out left, right, and center in a way that a lot of people don't actually understand what it is, what its impact is on people, and what are the measures people have to take in the day-to-day to stay alive, and how serious it actually is. Yeah. So the combination of 10 years of annoyance of that in society as a human living and working, combined with my artistic desire to see if I had what it takes to be a professional director, made Standstill.
I love the way that you created a really immersive film, in the sense that we feel the claustrophobia of what's happening to her and the way that she's really trapped. And you use the goldfish. She's got this wonderful goldfish friend who she loves, and then, you know, he's kind of an audience for her, really, and tracks what's happening to her through the film. Tell us a bit about your techniques for how you sort of came to create such a claustrophobic atmosphere in the movie.
I think the first decision I made from a creative point of view was to never mention the word diabetes in this film. So that all of a sudden narrows down how you have to visually tell this story. And because she's alone in a car, the goldfish became a really important sort of vector for two reasons: for her to have someone to talk to, and for basically for her existence to be mirrored by something else as well. And there's another sneaky reason, is that I've noticed that a lot of people have more empathy for animals than they do for their fellow humans.
How did you deal with the fact that that's really personal to you? It's quite hard making movies about things that are really personal, isn't it?
It was really hard, and it was something that I had potentially underestimated, how there was that challenge of not necessarily wanting to dig down deep and find all those feelings that I actually have to deal with every day, but then needing to do that to actually really locate the sort of golden nugget that drives the story forward. But I drove myself to do this because I guess I have so many other friends as well who have type 1 diabetes, and I used to volunteer in a camp in Ecuador with children who have type 1 diabetes, and a few of the people that I used to take care of who are younger than me have died from it as well. And so I guess for all those reasons, I was just I'm doing this, and it's not just for my own experience, it's for the fact that I actually haven't seen this life experience portrayed in this way on screen. And I feel like my fellow diabetics will all kind of silently appreciate or kind of give that nod of oh, now I can just share this to a family friend who thinks that I just have to watch what I eat. It's so much more than that. So I think kind of scaling it to something that was outside of myself was the really helpful to navigate those waters.
Yeah. You must have worked very hard with your lead actress. Was she aware of the dangers? Was it a real immersion for her? How did you feel about sort of workshopping some of those truths with her?
Ah, it's the best privilege. I love working with actors. And it's not her lived experience, but we just talked a lot. And from the first chat over like a coffee, just to see if we had a creative connection, I knew that there were a few pathways for her into this character. And then what we did is she would bring in references from books or poetry that she was reading. She was like, this sentence here evokes a feeling. Is that the direction you want to go in? And so we were talking about mirroring like images a lot rather than rehearsing the emotion. And for like the more powerful emotional scene in like sort of the second half of the movie, I never actually rehearsed that because I just spent all our rehearsal time clarifying the direction so that when we were ready to film, that was so internal to her that I just needed to say, go, and like release and like just go for it and give me what you feel is your character. So that was a really beautiful collaborative experience.
Yeah. So you obviously had a really great team around you.
So the crew I worked with on Standstill, I was really proud to be able to work with because they were friends, a lot of them first and foremost, and the reason why they showed up on set was not because they saw necessarily that as their biggest professional opportunity, but it was really as a gesture of support for me to grow into director because this was my first professional short film, even though I had worked in the industry before in different capacities. So it was just such a wonderful experience to be able to bring all those talents and creative skills together. And you're right. I did work on all of those layers to tell the story because I had that golden rule of never mentioning the word diabetes. And it was like, how does that make me feel? Well, it makes me feel vulnerable. Okay, how do I express vulnerability through all the sound of, you know, whales and other strange creatures that seep into the soundscape that we don't actively notice, but when you're sat in a theater watching it, you feel them because they kind of vibrate inside of you. So it was about triggering all of those senses in the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And because of course we can't feel what she's feeling. We don't have a sensation of our own, the breath leaving our body or pain, which is obviously, a real barrier to filming. You've got to convey it in such a nuanced way. And I think that's what you achieved, so brilliantly with your choice of location and the sound and your use of, you just mentioned a whale sound. That was a really interesting choice.
Yeah, well, so the theme of water runs through the film, from basically Howard the goldfish being in his tank to him at a moment not being in his tank and what water brings to her. When she dips her fingers into it, it's like that sensation of groundedness. And the whales, for me, it was something that I imagined even while the script was being written. So it came really early on. And it just felt like that's what it feels like when your body is sinking into this state that is actually a heightened emergency state where you are conscious, but gradually less so. And all of your abilities to communicate, to express yourself, to find a solution and to cogitate are stripped away one by one. And based on that, I made the choices to strip away the colors, strip away a lot of her clothing, and strip away all of the realism that was keeping her anchored is all of a sudden like sort of going away.
You mentioned it was a micro budget film, and you got some money from the Arts Council in Canada.
The Quebec Art Council gave me an emerging artist production grant to make this film possible. And it's not enough by any stretch of the imagination to actually make this film if you were to have to work under like not friends and family and favors, but I just drew in everyone who had ever offered to help me do something. I just called in all of those favors in one shot.
One of the things that we're examining a lot in KIFF is this idea that that filmmakers there's no obvious path sometimes to getting your films made, you have to take some really bold steps. And oftentimes you have to support yourself and raise a micro budget to do it. Just tell me about what that, what you took from that as a lesson and what you would do going forward.
I really like your question because that just made me realize that the barriers to entry to the film industry are actually a good training school for what it is to actually make a film.
Yeah.
Because they are like problem solving after problem solving of how do you go to A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
And there isn't a manual that's gonna like give you a clear roadmap. And everyone's situation is different, and everyone's family network and friends network and support network are different. And for sure, some people's mountains are a bit steeper than others, but that's the same when you go and make a film. Some people have bigger budgets than others. Some, there's always going to be sort of an uneven level playing field. And learning how to navigate that and make the most out of it is what you have to learn to do, I think, as an emerging director, and how to find and make your voice shine through that.
Yeah.
And so I think, one of the first things that I did when I graduated film school wasn't to go and make a film. I started working in the industry at a film commission, which was a great school because I was reading scripts all the time, proposing locations, taking film executives on location scouts, and just learning what the business of film is like. And doing that for 2 years gave me such like a good understanding of, okay, how to position myself, how do I like working with directors, what kind of traits do I like, what kind of questions do I like them to ask. But also it gave me some contacts in the film industry that I was able to tap into when it came time to make Standstill. And I think I always knew I wanted to make films. So it wasn't a question of putting my dreams aside. It was a question of saying, actually, there are a few things I need to learn so that then I can kind of kickstart. And I'm so happy I didn't make Standstill straight out of university because I made films in film school, but there's just such a steep learning curve between my last film in film school and Standstill. And that's all those 2 years of working in something else. So I would just say to people who are starting out, just cling on to the opportunities that you do see around you. And you can always pivot from one and like use one to leverage it to go somewhere else. But all that time that you spend developing, as long as you're doing it with your eyes wide open and asking questions and just really seeing how you can learn from it, they're all going to make you a better director.
The amazing things about the film business and the really tough things about it is that you have to wear a lot of different hats. You have to be a lot of things to a lot of people so that, particularly in your position, if you're directing, writing and producing, which, one hopes eventually you can, perhaps pass off one of those jobs at least to somebody to do that, in a collaboration perhaps later on. But, that's a lot of hats to wear. And you've got to have some sense of what the business is about. You've got to have some sense of how to navigate people, how to every problem. I say this every time, but film making is one giant problem, or actually a series of hundreds of problems that you have to solve, like endless obstacles. And you have to have all these different hats to be able to solve them. There's finance, there's locations. I mean, I think you mentioned that you had a problem getting a license to film on the bridge. Tell us about that, because that's a really good example of a lesson that we you learned.
So the location I had in mind was a disused part of a highway that was built as an existing highway, but that just wasn't in use. So it wouldn't be a question of shutting it down. It was just a question of asking for permission to film there, because otherwise I could not have afforded to shut down a highway. Yeah. Okay. And so during that process, I knew it would require me to communicate with the Quebec police, the Ministry of Transport, the local municipalities. And so I kind of communicated with those 3 sets of bodies 3 months in advance of my filming date. And because that was like their standard lead times. And as the filming went on, or sorry, not the filming, the process went on, I got an, okay, you can film for those dates, great. So I don't know, I just had a pinch in my heart one morning. I was like, I'm just going to go back to my location and check it. It was a 45-minute drive, so it was a bit of a commitment. But I was like, there's something I just need to check. And I got there and I realized there was construction trailers that had appeared on this location, which I refer to as my location. and so I emailed the Ministry of Transport and I'm like, why are these here? Will these be gone by next weekend? And then he kind of emailed back and was like, and then they revoked my permit because actually there was a communication error and they hadn't actually done their due diligence. And then they wouldn't tell me when these works would be completed because of XYZ policy. And so but when I was on there visiting, I took photos of all of like the little permits so I found the contractor in charge of it and I called him up and I spoke to the general manager and he's like, so off the record, if I'm not out of there by 6 weeks, I'm in big trouble. So I was like, okay, thank you. But this was just because it was off the record that he would give me this information. So then I had to like replan the whole thing for like, I added a 2-week buffer zone as well on top of that to make sure, because like construction always overruns. And then I actually ended up being able to film. But I only got my permit 4 days before. So that was a total of 5 months of prep for one location. But, you know, I had people ask me, oh, why don't you do it on a country road? Why don't you do it in all kinds of other places? And I was like, there are no stakes. If my character isn't isolated on the highway, there are no stakes. This film needs this.
So on Standstill, you know, you had many roles to fulfill and many hats, including, you know, trying to sort out these locations, these bridges, the civil authorities. But when you get behind a camera, surely you can't be expected to do everything at once. So who was looking after that for you on set?
Yeah, it's really important to even if you are doing some of the producing, I think, as a director, especially as a first-time director, if you want that aspect of your role to shine, you need to give it 100% of your brain capacity. And so I actually roped in my partner, Gareth, who had never done this before, but he had transferable skills because he came from a project management and engineering industry. So I was like, I'll like show you the few things that you might not know from this industry, but you know how to manage a project. So I just said, here's, you know, what I have so far. And honestly, like, here's my credit card and see you in 3 days. I think as a director, you have to keep your listening part open as wide as humanly possible. Yeah. Even when you're physically tired and doing all these other things. And I feel like when I wear my producer hat on, that part is a bit smaller and there's a bit more strategy, forward planning, and like I'm not necessarily in the moment. And so I found that those two things together compete too much for me to be able to do them simultaneously.
And not just that, is there? There's the whole business now of navigating the film business, which is so different from the film business I grew up in, which was very straightforward. I mean, obviously I'm a dinosaur. So way back when, it was you made your film, the film went out in the movies, in the theaters, and then 4 months later, there was a DVD or, you know, there was a video. My God, that's really a long time ago. But now these windows have shrunk. There are streamers, you know, going on the whole time. There's TV, there's all sorts of different platforms upon which we can watch anything. Tell me, I want to understand how that affects the way that you approach your making your film, and does it open doors, or is it harder?
Like, try to understand what your audience is as much as you can, because I think what financiers and studio execs all want to hear is that you know what your audience is and that you can deliver product that they want, and they'll make the rest happen. If you can be sure that you can deliver as a director the product that those audiences will crave. On a quick side note about distribution as well, like Standstill, when I posted it on Omeletto, it got ripped and put on TikTok, divided in 4 pieces. And I didn't know about it because they didn't tag me or tag the film or even name the film in the title. So I got a text one morning. I was like, gee, you went overnight like viral on TikTok. And I'm like, what? I don't even have TikTok. And then, Standstill had like 3 million views overnight or over 2 days.
Was that a bad thing?
No, I didn't do the copyright sort of take down my video route because you know, when I was reading the comments, it was reaching its audience. It really made me realize like I had totally underestimated TikTok.
I really want everybody who's watching today to be really encouraged by, you know, your story of making your film, the way that you went about it, and the fact that you were really practical and you put 2 years of work into your the film commission, and then learnt in a sort of roundabout way, in a sense, how films are made and what people are looking for and why they get financed and where to shoot them, and then apply that knowledge and wisdom to your film.
I think you can never, if you want to be a director, for sure there's a few directors that we think of that are very like artsy and in their heads and don't do any of the producing. And it doesn't mean that you will always have to do the producing, but I think you do have to have a strategy for your life and for your career. It doesn't, and like strategies adapt and you shift for sure. But to say like from the get-go, I only want to direct, I think it's a good end point. But along the way, there might be other things required.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. And I think actually facilitating your own ability to direct is really the way forward, isn't it? Because you also learn everything about, you know, all the struggles that a producer will have, all the struggles that a writer will have along the way. I'm really interested to know whether there are any, I know you've worked in the UK and in Canada. Do you find it harder over here to make, over in the UK to make films and to attract finance? I guess there are obstacles everywhere we go, right?
There's definitely like no golden road. I think the first thing that you need to identify is what kind of storyteller you are. I came to the UK to work because I've always loved British cinema. And I realized that my voice as a writer and as a director, I identified with British filmmaking more than I did with Canadian cinema. And that might be because though I'm French Canadian, I write in English. I think the British film industry has a tradition of working on the development of story a lot more. I like how that translates, especially in like the setup and delivery in the third act, and how those stories become really gripping, sort of fulfilling, entertaining, yet like artistically evolved films.
I wish you all the luck in the world for your short, for Standstill, and for all the films you're going to make. And I hope we can stay in touch. And I hope you'll come to KIFF.
I will, of course.
Thank you so much, Katia. It was lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much to Katia. It was really great to talk to her. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. See you again next time.